They used to laugh at his little project over Sunday dinner, calling it a hobby, a phase, a waste of time. 1 year later, he pulled up to the same house in a Tesla, wearing a custom suit, fresh off a $100 million deal. What happened next at the dinner table left even his father speechless. Every Sunday, without fail, the Miller family gathered like it was Thanksgiving and Judgment Day rolled into one. Their father's colonial home in leafy Connecticut stood tall, white columns, trimmed hedges, big lawn, small hearts. Bacon sizzled on the patio grill, lemonade flowed like wine, and sarcasm hung in the air heavier than the summer heat. And the punchline was always the same. Brian. "Maybe you should learn how to make dumplings," Aunt Clara snorted across the table, her fork pointed like a weapon. "Since the business isn't feeding you." Chuckles bounced around like a well-practiced choir. Uncle Lou wiped his mouth with a napkin, clearly pleased with the zinger. Even his cousins smirked behind their iced teas. Brian just stirred his coffee and nodded. The corners of his mouth curled into that same practiced half-smile. The one that said, "Sure, I'll play along again." He was 32, and to them, he might as well have been a teenager with a toy keyboard. 6 years. That's how long he'd been building his voice interface startup from scratch. Healthcare automation, AI-driven speech-to-action tools for doctors and clinics. Revolutionary, if you asked him. Pathetic, if you asked anyone at that table. Brian lived in a rented apartment above a nail salon in Bridgeport, ate more noodles than any human should, slept 4 hours a night. If that, his world was code, coffee, crashes, and climbing back again. But none of that mattered when your older brother ran 12 gyms and parked a new SUV in the driveway every year. "Still running that hobby project?" Zach said, clapping a meaty hand on Brian's back like he was congratulating a Boy Scout. "If it flops, I've got a spot at the front desk. Could use someone to fold towels and track class signups." More laughter. Not cruel, not venomous, just condescending. Which was worse. Brian didn't flinch. He just nodded, smiled, sipped. But inside, something cracked. It always did. They didn't hate him. They just didn't believe in him. And that was sharper than hate, because hate meant you mattered. This was dismissal, neatly wrapped in family tradition and served with bacon and sweet tea. They never asked about his progress, never asked how his latest prototype demo went, or whether the clinic in Boston renewed their trial. They only wanted to know one thing: when he'd give up and get a real job. Something with a name badge, a boss, and a 401k. Brian looked across the table at his father, quiet behind the newspaper, at his mother, nervously smoothing the tablecloth, at Zach, already talking protein shakes and profit margins. And in that moment, something shifted. Not a breakdown, not a tantrum, just a quiet realization. They had no idea what was coming. To be continued? Next. What happened next changed everything. You won't want to miss how the family joke flipped the script. Medico wasn't just a startup. It was a sinking raft, held together with duct tape, late nights, and one guy who refused to let go. Everyone else had already jumped. 2 investors pulled out in the same week, one citing market volatility, the other ghosting without a word. Jake, his co-founder and college buddy, packed up for a shiny corporate gig in Austin, left behind a polite email in a folder labeled Final Build Notes. Brian didn't even open it, didn't need to. The guy was gone. What remained was Brian, a beat-up Lenovo, and a fragile string of code that could either change healthcare or blow up in his face. He'd submitted the Med Echo prototype to every incubator and grant, pitch competition, and accelerator that had an open button. His inbox was a graveyard of "thank you for your submission" messages. A few didn't even bother with that. One panelist actually fell asleep during his pitch. His demo froze halfway through, and someone in the back whispered, "Cute app." That one stung. He started keeping a spreadsheet of rejections, just for the pain of it. Then came the miracle, an email, short, direct, subject line, "Medeco, let's talk." From Julia Reyes. He almost deleted it, assuming spam or another constructive feedback paragraph, but something about the signature caught his eye. Reyes Capital Ventures, San Francisco. That night, they Zoomed. Brian wore a clean shirt and tried to smile, even though he hadn't slept in 2 days. Julia didn't want fluff or pitch decks or hockey stick graphs. She just wanted to see the thing work. Brian shared his screen, pressed record. "Patient dictation begins now," he said, and spoke like a physician. "Elderly male, age 72, diagnosed with atrial fibrillation, prescribed Eliquis, follow-up in 2 weeks." Seconds later, the MedEcho interface generated a structured, compliant, fully formatted medical report, time-stamped, coded, and ready for EMR export. Julia's eyes didn't blink. "How much do you need to finish this?" He swallowed hard. 200,000. I can build it in 8 weeks. Scalable, HIPAA-compliant, voice to report in under 5 seconds. She didn't blink. "Send wiring instructions. Tonight." It hit him like a punch to the ribs. He'd been so used to almost funded, almost published, almost enough, and suddenly, it was real. That night, he didn't celebrate, didn't post it online, didn't tell his family. Just opened the laptop and started rewriting half the code base. He shut down everything else, turned off his phone, let calls from bill collectors and family roll to voicemail, slept in 3-hour increments, ate when the light outside got too dim to see, lost 11 pounds without noticing. Went through a bag of coffee beans every 3 days, ordered takeout once in an entire month, and forgot to eat half of it. He coded in silence, surrounded by walls covered in sticky notes. API endpoints, error logs, post-it diagrams, a piece of printer paper that just said, in thick red marker, "You don't get a second miracle." 8 weeks later, MedEcho breathed. It worked. Fully, clean, fast. Like the damn thing had been alive this whole time, just waiting for someone stubborn enough to build it right. The official launch of MedEcho didn't come with confetti or news anchors banging on his door. It started with a grainy screen-recorded demo that Brian almost didn't upload. A doctor in a white coat speaks into a headset. "Patient, 38-year-old female, history of type 1 diabetes, presenting with acute fatigue and blurred vision." Seconds later, MedEcho generates a fully formatted report, clean, coded, insurance-ready, all in real time. No typing, no errors, no time wasted. Brian posted the clip to a medical subreddit on a Wednesday morning with the title, "Built a thing for docs. Saves 3 hours a day. Thoughts?" He closed the tab, went to refill his coffee. By the time he came back, the post had 11 comments. 2 hours later, 1,200 upvotes. Next morning, 100,000 views. By the third day, 3.2 million. People weren't just watching, they were asking how to get it. Nurses, clinicians, independent practices, then regional hospitals. Then, Washington, D.C., a federal procurement officer sent an inquiry through the contact form. A second one emailed directly. They wanted to schedule a demo with compliance oversight. Government speak for, "We're watching and we're interested." Brian watched it all from the same desk where he'd been living off peanut butter crackers 2 months earlier. He kept things lean, signed 3 clients, then 5, then a cluster of 15 through a healthcare IT group. Integration took off like a rocket. 14 federal hospitals onboarded within 6 weeks. And still, the Miller family Sundays rolled on, like none of it ever happened. Same porch, same lemonade, same recycled jokes. Zach still parked his Range Rover in the driveway like a peacock flexing feathers. Aunt Clara still offered passive-aggressive recipes, and Brian, now quietly CEO of a startup gaining traction on Capitol Hill, still brought his own thermos of coffee and sat in the corner like an unpaid intern, until his father finally asked. It was near the end of dinner, right before pie. A pause in the conversation, the clink of a spoon. Then, "So," his dad said, folding his napkin, "that little voice software of yours, illegal?" Brian didn't flinch, just took a breath and nodded. Already integrated in 14 federal hospitals. A long silence, just the buzz of the porch light and Zach slurping his second root beer float. Then the old man, once a respected surgeon, gave the smallest nod. "Honestly, that's impressive." No applause, no standing ovation, just 4 words. But Brian heard them louder than anything else that day. 1 year. That's how long it took for the so-called family embarrassment to turn into a full-blown, revenue-pulling, industry-rattling force of nature. MedEcho was no longer some scrappy side project running on a second-hand laptop and caffeine fumes. It was now a full-scale operation, pulling in $5 million a month, monthly. Brian had a real office now, glass walls, actual chairs with back support, and a team of 60 razor-sharp engineers, ops leads, and medtech whisperers who knew exactly what they were building. Not just software, but a system hospitals could rely on and doctors could trust with their time, their sanity, and their patient care. Brian even started wearing jackets, not because he liked the fit, he didn't, but because suddenly he was the one being asked to give keynote talks about AI, about the future of medical documentation, about what happens when a guy no one believed in doesn't just prove them wrong, he rewrites the rules. Then came Seattle. It was a January healthcare innovation conference, one of those glitzy, invite-only gigs with big-name sponsors, free espresso bars, and buzzwords flying faster than luggage on a Monday. Brian wasn't just attending, he was speaking. Headliner slot, prime time. He stood under stage lights, clicker in hand, walking a ballroom full of execs through a live MedEcho demo. The audience wasn't blinking. Half were nodding. A few were already texting their teams under the table. Afterward, in the lounge outside the main hall, a man in a navy suit approached. No name tag, no smile, just confidence, and a quiet voice that cut through the funnel of the crowd like a scalpel. "I'm with Amazon Health," he said. "We'd like to acquire your platform. Offers at $100 million. Brian blinked. He had a glass of water in his hand, dropped it. Didn't even notice until it shattered on the floor. "I'll need 24 hours, he said out loud, but inside, he was already screaming, "Yes, yes, yes, how is this real? Yes." He kept his face calm, thanked the man, walked away like he had a dozen of those offers lined up. Then ducked into a bathroom stall and just stood there, staring at the tile wall, trying to process the fact that a kid with a busted laptop and a rejected grant spreadsheet was now holding a golden ticket worth 9 figures. The deal closed in March, $100 million, inked, signed, transferred, and just like that, everything changed. The family didn't know yet, but the world had just found out who Brian Miller really was. The driveway was the same. So was the wraparound porch with its peeling white railings and overwatered flower boxes. But this time, the car that rolled in wasn't Brian's rusted-out Honda with a cracked phone mount dangling from the dash. It was a Tesla Model X, deep black, chrome trim. Quiet as a whisper, he parked where Zach's Range Rover usually sat, just for fun. He stepped out wearing a tailored navy suit that still had the tag stitched into the lining, because, yes, it was that new. He adjusted his collar, checked the mirror, and told himself to breathe. But the nerves weren't about money, or status, or the fact that he had a CEO title now and a bank account to match. It was about them. He walked up the stone steps with a steady pace, past the same squeaky wind chime and into the same Sunday smells, grilled meat, fresh-baked rolls, and the faint aroma of generational condescension. Dinner was already underway. Everyone looked up, silence. No backslaps, no jokes. Not yet. Brian sat down in his usual seat, end of the table, right next to the kids' area. No one moved, until Aunt Clara, queen of one-liners, raised her wine glass and gave him that look, the one that had cut him down 1,000 times before. "Well," she said, voice sweet as syrup, "I guess now you get to joke about all the other failures." Brian paused, then chuckled. A real laugh this time. "Not really," he said, smiling. "I'm too busy helping doctors get their lives back. 40 hours a month, not wasted on paperwork anymore." You could have heard a fork drop. Even Zach, fitness mogul, family golden boy, stopped mid-sip. Then, from the far side of the table, a chair scraped. His father stood up. The same man who once asked if MedEcho was even legal. The surgeon. The skeptic. He walked over slowly, didn't say a word at first, just wrapped his arms around Brian in a firm, deliberate hug. When he pulled back, his voice was low but clear. "I was wrong," he said, "and I'm proud of you." And just like that, applause. Genuine, surprising, and loud. Even Zach clapped. Someone shouted from the kitchen, "There he is, our Bill Gates." Brian blinked, half laughed, half froze. He didn't know what to say, didn't know what to feel, but inside, Something that had been clenching his chest for years finally let go. He wasn't the joke anymore. He was the one they respected. 12 months after the deal, Brian Miller wasn't waking up to an alarm clock. He was waking up to the ocean, a rhythmic crash of waves below the deck of his cliffside home in Laguna Beach. Not a rental, not a timeshare, not a borrowed weekend stay. His deeded, paid in full. The house had floor-to-ceiling glass walls, smooth concrete floors that stayed cool in the California heat, and a patio that reached out toward the Pacific like it wanted to shake hands with the horizon. From here, everything looked small, especially the people who used to make him feel that way. His mornings started slow now. No blinking servers, no 3 a.m. bug hunts. Just dark roast coffee, emails from Harvard and Stanford, and weekly check-ins with the healthcare innovation fund he started, Miller Fellows. His foundation was backing medtech students with so-called unrealistic ideas, because he'd lived what it meant to be called unrealistic. He still remembered every door that slammed. Now, he was building new ones and handing out keys. Brian didn't care for the spotlight, but the spotlight came anyway. One week, it was an invite to speak at a TED conference. Another week, MIT wanted him on a cross-functional advisory board. LinkedIn had him listed as a thought leader, whatever that meant. CNBC requested an interview. Forbes put his name on a 40 under 40 list. He was 33. And still, he showed up for Sunday dinners. Same porch, same backyard, same family that used to laugh every time he said, "I think I've got something here." He didn't do it to prove a point. He didn't need to. That part was already done. But he showed up because the whole story mattered. Not just the part where he made it, the rejection, the silence, the thinly veiled jabs over meatloaf. It all built him. That pain had shape now, purpose, and it lived in the way he listened. The way he spoke, the way he kept helping without keeping score. Zach, the golden boy brother, now called Brian every week to ask how to boost retention across his gym memberships. Brian set up automated check-in flows, gamified reward systems, and even optimized class bookings using predictive data. The results were immediate. Revenue jumped 14% in 2 months. "You're some kind of wizard," Zach said, half joking. "No," Brian answered with a half smile. "Just a guy who knows how to make overlooked systems run better." Zach didn't know if he meant software or family, maybe both. But here's the thing. The biggest shift wasn't the house, or the car, or the inbox full of invitations with gold-trimmed logos. The biggest shift was internal. Brian didn't need applause. He didn't crave recognition. Because he'd already been through the darkest tunnel, the one where people don't laugh at you because they're cruel. They laugh because they can't see what you see. They need you to be small so their world stays simple. But Brian didn't play small. He played long, and that's what they never understood, that this was never about revenge. Not for the dumpling jokes, not for the job offers to fold towels, not even for the polite smiles when he explained what Medeco was. This wasn't revenge. It was survival. It was what it looked like when someone just refused to quit, even when the entire room tried to write him out of the story. And now? Now, his nieces and nephews would run up to him after dinner, crowding around like little satellites around a planet that finally started glowing. "Uncle Brian," they'd say, eyes wide, "how'd you become a millionaire?" He'd smile, lean back, take a long sip of lemonade, and then answer, calm and steady, like he'd been waiting for the question. "I was the guy they used to laugh at, so I just kept walking. That's it. I kept going when nobody clapped, when nobody believed, when even I wasn't sure. I kept walking until I looked around and realized I was the only one left standing." And every time he said it, it landed just a little deeper. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. He wasn't the prodigy. He wasn't the genius. He wasn't even the favorite. He was the one who didn't stop. And that made all the difference.